I did spend 7 years prior to my recent appointment as Deacon at Griffith University, and the project that I want to talk to you about today was one I carried out while I was at Griffith, but I was working with colleagues. I had worked previously at Deakin, and I was working with colleagues at Deakin and colleagues at Queensland University of Technology and the National Institute of Education in Singapore. As Matt said, I've worked looking at digital games from many aspects, in school, out of school, mostly with children. My background, as you can tell from this, is in the area of literacy and learning. So Serious Play was a 3-year research project involving collaboration between 3 Australian universities and teachers in 10 schools across 2 Australian states. Yam Chan Chi was a partner investigator, and as I've said, the rest of us in Australia worked. The other partners were the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development in Victoria, so it's the Victorian Education Department were partners, and in Queensland 6 individual Queensland schools were partners, including both state schools and private schools. They comprised, they came from a wide range of areas, very diverse populations, mixed and single-sex schools, and we worked with kids as young as about 7, mostly so kids in grade 1 through to, for the most part, up to about year 9 or 10, so up to about ages 15, 16. But one of our teachers was also teaching year 12 media studies, and those year 12, those final year students also became involved. Now, I don't know if I can get the, there we go, right. So as you can see, we are working with this group of 32 teachers, and as a 3-year project, we worked with the teachers over time, and students changed each year, but the teachers stayed. So a lot of the concern with the project was to look at the ways in which teachers work with digital games, to look at the practicalities in the classroom. It was very important to us to recognise the teachers' expertise and the knowledge that the teachers brought. This was very much seeing, it was a project that drew on a kind of funds of knowledge approach, which used both teachers and students as having knowledge that they bring to what they do, and that informs it. We didn't assume that the teachers would have a high level of technical knowledge or familiarity. The teachers were all volunteers, but they didn't have to know games or be good at technology or do any of those things. They just were, we just wanted them to be interested to explore this and see what happened. So there's some of our teachers. On the website that I'll give you at the end, and that I think is on the blurb, we have a number of videos with the teachers talking about what they were doing, with kids talking, with us talking, everybody's talking really, and lots of projects. So I didn't know how the screen time would go, so I didn't put the videos up. So the project focused on these areas. There was a focus on teachers and what teachers do, a focus on students, focus on a very important, I think, to be aware of the role of context, and that the kind of ways in which kids engage with games in schools is quite different from the ways in which they engage with, or is likely to be quite different to how they engage out of school. We had a focus, very strong focus on curriculum and learning across the range of curriculum areas. We were looking at games themselves, and we wanted also to look at how teachers would assess the kind of learning that the games made possible, and or how assessment, what the games enabled, articulated or linked to the curriculum, the formal curriculum. So our aims were to explore how students with widely different preferences and experience of games and digital culture approach games-based teaching in the classroom, to look at how teachers were able to work with games most effectively, what kinds of teaching practices and approaches made the best use of games capacities, the opportunities for creativity. I was very struck by that peak of Sam's pyramid on that focus on creativity. And so the opportunity the games provided for creativity, production and innovation, the ways in which learning through games challenge and extend multimodal literacy learning. And for people in the literacy area, as we all are, I think, at least the 3 speakers, that question of how kids make meaning, not just through print, but through other means as well, is increasingly important in contemporary times. And we wanted to look at assessment and whether we needed to develop a specific assessment framework to identify and support what games-based learning made possible. I'll just move fairly quickly. So in this structure, the teachers introduced the digital games. As I said, we ran over 3 years. The teachers would work with a different member of the project team. Sometimes their units were quite short. Sometimes they ran over a whole term. And they ranged across a wide range of curriculum areas. So in addition to literacy and English and studies of society and environment, which is like a mix of history and geography and civics and economics, in maths, in Chinese, which is a foreign language in Australia for most students, many students, religion. So it really depended on where the teachers were located, which curriculum areas they were working with. And we met the teachers, drew the teachers together twice a year for the period of the project. So altogether, I think they met 7 times. We had a sort of party at the end. But there was a great deal of time spent with teachers talking about what they'd done, about what they'd learned, about what they were trying out, what they thought they'd do next time. We had a series of themes that we were putting to the teachers, but it really was a project that developed collectively as we went. Our data gathering, again, as with Sam's, was a mixed method approach. We used surveys, and if I get time, I'll show you some of the surveys, the kids' responses on surveys, but we also obviously observed kids, we interviewed teachers, we interviewed kids, we took videos and so forth. So the 3 focuses of our research were to look at what we called learning with games and analysing games and making games. And the learning with games was really about looking at games-based learning. Some of it was with purpose-built serious games. Some of it was with commercial off-the-shelf games. So you can see here, this is Bree with an English class, and she was looking at Assassin's Creed and getting the kids to do work around creative writing, to do work around vocabulary, to share knowledge around narrative development, things like that. Analysing games was where we asked students to step back and take a critical lens, I guess, a critical literacy lens, to look at the things like the kind of values or the assumptions or the structures in the games, the ways in which characters worked and so on, and then making games. And we had some fabulous things that particularly some of the younger kids were doing with things like Scratch, but the older kids were also in the specialist classes were doing very interesting work. This was also a time when Minecraft was really becoming very prominent, and kids were making things in Minecraft, which was not quite making games, but it's certainly making and creating, I think, in what proved to be very productive ways. So, as you can see, this is a still from the full documentary. I thought if I have time, I think I have time, I just run you through some of the responses that the students had to their experience of working with digital games. So we actually had about 400 students each year. For this survey, not all of the students took part. Not the very little ones didn't. And 1 or 2 of the schools didn't. So this is 232 students. So we're looking at descriptive stats, but I think quite a good spread. So you can see it's about a ratio of 2 to 1 boys to girls. A larger cohort in the elementary area than the secondary. These were in the 2 states, Queensland and Victoria. These ones were the year 4 kids, so not the younger ones, up to year 9. And as it happened, there were a large number of them were year 9 students. You can see here these students this is part of a very long project. These are upper elementary school students playing Myst. So we had background data, what games they played outside school. Then on the focus of games in the classroom, we then asked them about each of these 3, their experience of each of these three kinds of classroom work. And of course, not all students did all of these three kinds. It depended on what their teacher was doing, what the subject was, and so on. Okay, so we asked the kids some questions. We thought it was really important from the students' point of view to actually learn what they thought mattered. So we asked the kids, what can computer games help you learn? And these points that we have on the side, that the making things interesting, solving problems and so on, they were drawn from previous surveys, including one that we had done in an antecedent project, but also in other people's surveys. In some cases, we made the wording slightly simpler, so that the younger students would know what we were talking about. Again, I think this is quite an interesting spread of responses. One of the things I think is very interesting about this is the idea, what they like is things like making it interesting and solving problems and using your imagination. And the thing they think it's least, what can computer games help you learn? Well, learning about computers, yes, it does, but that you don't learn as much there or computers don't make you want to learn as much about that as they do when they can make things interesting or solve problems, like computer games, I mean video games, digital games. That middle section where you've got important ideas about the topic and important facts about the topic, I haven't got time to talk about it now, but again, this might be something people want to take up later. But the mix of the conceptual understandings that working with digital games can make possible and or the kind of factual side of that. I think it's very interesting. I think there's a lot of blurring of boundaries between those that people sometimes get confused with. So we asked the kids also, we interviewed them and what they thought made games good, and they said, well, it have to be fun and enjoyable. Again, echoing Sam's PowerPoint. They can make learning about a subject a lot more fun. They're good at teaching people how to be happy, and it can make learning more enjoyable. But I think that comment on the other side is really telling. You have to completely correctly complete a series of questions before you can play the game, where you smack bugs for points. The quicker you completed the questions, the more time you had to play the bug whack game. The problem was the game wasn't fun at all, and game players gave them no motivation to complete the question. And again, I think, if I put my teacher's hat on, I think if you're giving kids a game and it's a pointless game, or that it's not actually stimulating or challenging, they're not fools. We asked them what they thought problems might be with using games in the classroom. The biggest one was that you mightn't finish by the end of the lesson. And again, I think it's a really real world kind of observation. It's a reflection, I guess, of technology in schools, and also that games don't actually always just tick over at the same rate for everyone. The whole point of games really is that you can mess around and explore and get things right or get things wrong and go your own way a bit. They're not very biddable. They're not very packageable necessarily. That you might play parts you weren't meant to. And again, if you go down to the bottom, look at the one that they think is the least problem. That question of whether computer games are suitable for school. They don't think that's a problem. And another one which we thought would be much higher was, in terms of problems, would be that the parents wouldn't want them to do that. Well, they didn't think their parents would have a problem. They thought their parents would be pretty fine with it by comparison with the other problems there. So just to really quickly, and I'm conscious this is very wordy for a slide and I apologise, but I think, and this came across after 3 years of work in 10 schools, over 30 teachers, many kids, trying to pull together some of these findings over this research project, that using digital games in the classroom requires just as much complex decision making for the teacher as any other subject matter or approach. That there's variation in student disposition towards digital games. I think this is really important. Not all kids like games. Not all kids are good at games. Some kids can't stand games. Some kids think they're fantastic. So just as with any other form of teaching, I think it's really, really important, and we found it was really important for the teacher to recognise the diversity and the individuality of the kids concerned. Highly engaged to disengaged. And that, I think, pretty thoroughly discredited notion of digital natives was clearly blown out of the water here as well. Mostly, Teachers reported, and we observed, that they were very positive in their approach to games work. But some students who were normally successful felt challenged by the use of games. The converse of that was that some students who tend to be a bit marginal in school experienced success in ways they hadn't. But I think to behave as though games are going to be right for everyone, just like any other resource, it requires nuancing and skill, and what the teacher does is tremendously important. Teachers reported, as I just said before, it enabled some students who are not usually successful to shine. It was also very disruptive, and that while there was often a sense of risk involved in using digital games, as the students often had higher levels of expertise than teachers, that actually worked out to be quite a positive thing. The positive student approach enabled teachers to learn from their students, and from students to learn from each other. That's the book that came out of the project. It's edited, as you saw, by myself. I was the principal chief investigator, Michael Deswani from the Queensland University of Technology, and Joanna Mara from Deakin. And that's a book really of both findings and case studies from the project. Some of the chapters are co-written with some of our teachers. If you want to follow up more about the survey that I just touched on in the second half of that presentation, it's in that edition of Learning Media and Technology. And as I've said, on the project website, we have a great deal of detail, including lots of videos. And I look forward to the discussion later on.